Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all. Not switched on. Is that better? So this morning I'm going to invite you to two meditations as we've been doing throughout this retreat. The first meditation will be a Serenity meditation. And the second meditation will be an insight meditation. Well, probably best to say more like a serenity-oriented meditation and serenity insight-oriented meditation. And I'll speak a little bit about serenity and insight, and then I'll talk a little bit about what object we're taking on with the serenity practice, which will be mudita, or appreciative joy, as a boundless divine abode. And with the insight meditation, we'll be focusing on the third establishment of mindfulness, or the third foundation of mindfulness, being establishment of mind, or sometimes it's called heart-mind, sometimes it's called consciousness. So just something about serenity and insight again. I've talked about this before just on the first night, and maybe you remembered some of it, maybe I'm not sure whether you did or not. But essentially, the serenity aspect of meditation is about emphasizing samadhi. Samadhi refers to concentration or meditative concentration. It's bringing the mind together and putting it in one spot. And it's about absorption. Absorption means one absorbs into the experience and the experience absorbs into one. So there's a kind of a oneness. It's kind of directed towards becoming one with the experience, or unifying with the experience. And with that, there's some factors that are really important. They're called the factors of jhana, the 5 jhana factors. A jhana is a highly concentrated state of altered state of consciousness, basically. And samadhi leads to jhanas. When the mind's concentrated, it gets very, very refined, and leads to further and further refined states of concentration. The factors of jhanas can be somewhat descriptive about how we cultivate serenity, how we cultivate concentration as well. And there are 5, and these are the factors. The first factor is initial application. I'll go through them all first, and then I'll break them down. Initial application. The second factor is sustained application. The third factor is piety, or joy. Joy that arises from concentration. There's lots of different ways joys can arise. The fourth factor is sukha, or happiness. And the fifth factor, sometimes I can't pronounce it quite correctly, but I'll try. Ekagata, which means unification of mind. Sometimes it means one-pointedness, like this laser-like narrowing of attention. But other times it means this unification of attention, so that one's mind isn't fragmented and going and dispersed and going in different directions, but it's all going in the one direction, unified. So this first factor, initial application, means you're putting your mind somewhere, you're putting your attention somewhere. Whatever it is, whether it be a mantra, or the breath, or sounds, or whatever you're attending to that, you're directing your mind at that. And in the case what we will use a bit later will be the experience of appreciative joy. I'll invite you to a sign of appreciative joy, how you recognize appreciative joy, and then I'll invite you to direct your attention to that, like you put it there. Sustained attention means it stays there. It stays there. Interestingly, the term they use in Pali for this is vichara. That's for that second factor. Sustained attention is called vichara, which means examining, which is interesting. Examining, but it's sort of experience like you put your attention somewhere and then you kind of go into it. It's like you go into it and kind of go in deeply. These two factors have been compared to the striking of a bell. It's like the initial strike is initial application. Sustained application is the resonance that one hears. It's sort of staying there. You hear that? It's kind of staying there. Another analogies that are used for these first two factors is like the flapping of the wings of a bird is like initial application. The bird holding flight is sustained application. And if any of you are surfers here, I would like to think that the initial paddling on a wave, putting the effort in to paddle on that wave, you're paddling away, that's initial application. Sustained application would be that you're standing up, you're on the board. You're cruising down the blue water or something like that. Okay, so they're the first two factors, and these are pretty fundamental. It's like when you ask to concentrate, at school we used to kind of struggle with it, but this is kind of like there is effort in this, but it is a right effort, it's a good effort. The third factor is piety. When you do that, whatever object you're doing, say if I'm paying attention to my breathing, and I bring it back, I'm playing, what I'm doing is called Anapana Samadhi here. It's not Anapanasati, it's Anapana Samadhi, meaning Sati means mindfulness, Samadhi means concentration. I'm concentrating on my nose tip, for example. When I can do that, it's like the mind will wobble off and wobble off and wobble off and wobble off and wobble off. And then it'll just stay there, just stay there, just stay there, just stay there. And it's sustaining, it's sustaining, it's sustaining. What happens is you have piety arise. This is another way of describing joy. It's joy that arises from concentration. And it's this bubbly energy. I feel it in my body. Sometimes people describe it as blissful, but there's various ranges of piety. It could be even at a very mild level, it could be just that feeling of relaxation that one begins to have when one concentrates. So you're relaxing. That's really cool. It can transform to waves of bliss rising up. I'm talking about rising up because that's the way it seems to work. It seems to rise up. It's like this uplifting energy. And then that transforms to sukha, which is called happiness, which is a more subtle and less gross than that kind of bubbly energy. It's a more buoyancy of heart-mind. It's a light-heartedness, a happiness, like your heart's smiling. And I think metta and sukha are very often associated. In fact, some of the phrases and some of the considerations of metta is wishing happiness for oneself and others. So there's a strong correlation between happiness and metta, right, in my mind. And then the final factor is this ekaggata, honing in and absorbing into it. There is many of you have probably heard of Rick Hanson, a wonderful neuropsychologist, teacher, meditation teacher, and author, and he does a lot. He's just prolific with what he produces. There's all sorts of things on the net. Anyway, he talked about HEAL as an acronym, and it is a way of changing negative bias. He has training in neuropsychology as well, so he's very much into the neurons, and he's written lots of books. But HEAL refers to having an experience, a positive experience, for example, enriching it, and then absorbing into it. So you have a positive experience, could be a moment of joy. Like you look at it. Yesterday I was walking along the pathway and I called Ali over because there was these bees in that plant, having the pollen. It was, wow, look at that. It was a moment of awe. Well, it wasn't profound, but it was quite joyous. We have joy within us. We have these positive experiences within us through our experience of life, and sometimes we can even cultivate them by recollecting things. So when you have that H of heal, it stands for having a wonderful experience, something that can counter negative bias. The reason he taught heal was to counter negative bias. We have a negative bias. Remember I talked about negative bias last night. The next aspect of heal refers to enrich. So we can enrich things by using words if we want, or thinking about the somatic experiences of what we're experiencing, or bringing to mind when we may have had that awesome experience or a joyous experience. And I'm just using joy here as an example. And then recollecting the way it feels in the body, certain cues around and all sorts of things. So you're enriching it, like you're getting it going. And then the A stands for absorb. And it's exactly what I was talking about before. It's this ekagata, this kind of becoming one with something. Ekagata, that's the fifth factor. As I mentioned earlier, sometimes it's described as this unification of attention. It's like everything is going in the one direction and kind of embraced, no more fragmentation. Other times it's described as this laser-like, powerful attention that can just penetrate into things. So what's the L stand for in heal? Well, what the L stands for is linking. And in this case, heal is used as a way of healing trauma sometimes. I use it as a way of helping people with their difficult experiences. And what happens here is that we link something that's opposite to the wonderful experience we link it to the wonderful experience, so that when the wonderful experience is so strong, it just completely dissolves the negative experience. It kind of transforms that negative bias to positive bias, if that makes sense. There's a wonderful analogy in the sutras, though it wasn't directed at this in particular, it was talking about karma. But there's a wonderful analogy about the Buddha comparing putting a tablespoon of salt. They probably didn't have tablespoons in those days, but a lot of salt in a glass of water. They probably, I don't know if they even had glass in those days anyway, 2,500 years ago. Anyway, putting a bunch of salt in a glass of water, a mug of water or a container of water, and trying to drink it makes it intolerable. You can't drink it. But if you put that same tablespoon, the same amount of salt into a pristine lake, it's irrelevant. And this is the same idea of what we have with this heal. It's like you're cultivating something so expansive, so pristine, so resourceful, that when you come along and you link it to a negative memory, for example, or a negative experience, an experience that's kind of troubling you, then it just sort of dissolves in that. Okay, so that's the L of this, and in my view, the L of heal refers to insight. It's like when we can bring that resource of a powerful mind, a composed mind, the power of concentration. Alan Wallace would talk about cultivating concentration to make the mind fit for purpose. So when the mind's fit for purpose, we turn that mind to inquire, and then we shift to insight. Some of the features of insight practice and mindfulness, as you may know, is in inquiry and investigation. Okay, so coming back to the meditations, and oh God, look at my time. I've already used up, how long have I used up? 15 minutes? Something like that.
20 minutes.
Hmm? You're going to get 2 meditations today, by the way. You're not just going to get me up here raving. So the Serenity meditation I want to invite you to is the third Brahma Vihara, and it is called appreciative joy. And last night we heard a wonderful Dharma talk about how we can cultivate joy. There's many ways of cultivating joy. You know, we can cultivate joy by reflecting on joyous things, for example. We can cultivate joy by being generous, being kind, and we can cultivate joy through concentration. And joy, as I've just mentioned, and joy is also the 4th factor of awakening. If you've done any, listen to any of those videos that Lisa may have sent you, we talked about the 7 factors of awakening. Joy is the 4th factor. It's an essential component of waking up. And in this case, when we're talking about mudita or appreciative joy, it's the joy of appreciation. And there's many ways we can have appreciation. One way we can do it is by just reflecting on our good deeds or good acts and kind acts and have some appreciation for ourselves. That's one way. Another way is by tuning into someone who's happy, virtuous, doing something really well, skillful, and we tune in to their joy, if that makes sense. Sometimes mudita is called sympathetic or empathetic joy. So we're tuning in, we're having empathy with another's joy. And so in that respect, the other person is doing all the work for the joy, and we're just kind of soaking it up, if that makes sense. Okay, and so when we do that, when we can identify, say, a sign of joy in our hearts, and it doesn't have to be felt sense, it can be like a cognition, if you're not into getting felt senses here. But when we can feel that sense of appreciation, whether it's be by someone else or from ourselves, we then mark that as a sign of mudita, or a sign of appreciative joy. And then we attend to it. Initial application, sustained application, and so on and so forth. We nurture it and nourish it, and we let it grow, and it grows. What we attend to becomes our reality. There's a saying by, not quite, William James said something very similar to that. And the Buddha did say something like, what we ponder upon regularly, to that our mind will incline. So, the near and far enemies of mudita. The far enemies of mudita are jealousy, envy, and when you're thinking about yourself, like you can't appreciate yourself, it's like a sense of cynicism, a kind of a critical sense of cynicism. You know, not seeing what your positives, not seeing your good qualities. The near enemies are really interesting. The near enemies are a kind of superficial celebration, an unwarranted rejoicing, a nauseating positivism. Has anybody experienced nauseating positivism? Mm-hmm. Put on a smile. And those thoughts, I reckon at an extreme end, maybe I'm going off track here a little bit, I reckon at an extreme end it would be a sense of narcissism. Maybe, I'm not sure. I'm going to have to think about that a little bit more. Anyway, so...
Sorry,
So, yep.
How did that time on narcissism tie with it?
How does it? Well, sometimes people think they're fantastic. You know, like I'm wonderful. I'm appreciating myself, but it's a distorted sign of appreciation. It's a distortion of self-appreciation. If that makes sense. Okay, so last night I was listening to a Dharma talk, and it was fantastic. I'm going to give you an example of this. Last night I was listening to a Dharma talk, and it began with some joyous commentary. It was wonderful. And I was sitting back in the Dharma talk here and listening to it, and I'm thinking, this is such a good Dharma talk. Maybe I'm redundant. No, hear me through, it's really good. Maybe they won't do any meditation retreats with me anymore. Maybe they'll just take over. No, let me finish this train of thought. And then, you know, what about me? What about me here? That kind of tendency would be aligned with the far enemy of mudita, if that makes sense. Like, I start constructing a self here who's feeling insecure. Maybe nobody will ever come to my retreats anymore because, you know.
You better look out.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of conceit. I am there, self-conceiving. I'm comparing myself. You can see what happens here. Can you see what happens here? What we ponder on and reflect on a lot, that becomes the inclination of our mind. And I could get really paranoid. I can think, oh, how am I going to tell Lisa about how good I am, or really good Dharma talk? I better watch it. I better make sure that Dharma talk tonight's really fantastic. I could go down that avenue.
And your outfits.
Sorry? What did you say? What did you say?
And your outfits.
And my outfit. Yeah. I deliberately put on a nice shirt. I've got a really daggy shirt back in the room. When I walked out in the kitchen the other day, they said, the girls, I'll call them the girls, and I'm not, the women, the wise women of the household, they said, that's a daggy shirt. Oh, no, it's grubby. You're not going to wear that, are you? Anyway. Rather than that, I just had to whisper that thought going on in the background. I wasn't engaging in it, definitely not. Rather than that, I could actually have appreciative joy. I could tune into the joy and also have a wonderful sense of appreciation. And if I was to choose, I'd much rather choose that than go down the path of paranoia and, self-delusion and, all that kind of cynicism about myself and my capacities and so on. And by the way, I'm nearly 70. All of these, it's wonderful that there's people rising up as wonderful Dharma teachers. I mean, I can have so much joy in that. And just tuning into the appreciation of hearing Dhamma. That's a sign of mudita. And if you want, you can use Ali as a sign of mudita, or sometimes I've used Lisa. I've listened to her give Dharma talks and, listened to some of her. I thought about how joyous and happy she is. I know she'll say she's not that happy all the time. But I've just thought about her good qualities, and I think, wow, she's such a good person. She's so virtuous and kind and compassionate. She's really sincere. And that gives joy. That's a way of rising joy. So you notice in your heart there's some sort of sign about appreciation. That's what becomes your object of meditation. It's a serenity object of meditation. Okay. Would you like me to talk about the insight bit now before we do the meditations? Yeah? Okay. All right. So with insight, it's different than serenity, as we've been learning on this retreat. Insight, when we talk about insight as reflecting what happens in the Satipatthana, the 4 establishments of mindfulness, it's a non-directed meditation. With the Serenity meditation, it's directed meditation. We're directing our attention at something. With insight, we're not directing it at anything. We're just sitting back and observing. We're not taking on one object, but we're looking at patterns, and we're looking at characteristics of existence. We're looking at what works with what, how this comes to be, and we're looking at dependent arising, basically, how something comes to be and how it ceases. And we're paying attention to impermanence. And when we pay attention to impermanence, we also pay attention to not self and dukkha, the dukkha nature of things, the unreliable nature of things. So this third foundation of mindfulness refers to heart-mind or mind. And what is that? Well, heart-mind has various functions. One function are perceptions. Another functions are what's called sankhara, or mental formations. There's 5 functions, but I won't bore you with all those details right now. But these perceptions and sankhara, unlike Vedana is another function, by the way. Their feeling quality, the hedonic tone of experience. Vedana we can't control, but we can influence how we perceive things and how we think about things, how we create things. So with mindfulness of mind, what we are tending to, there's 18 subsets actually, subdomains in this, but they include states of mind that are inclined towards greed, states of mind that are inclined towards generosity, states of mind that are inclined towards hatred, and states of mind that are inclined towards kindness and compassion, states of mind that are inclined towards, that are ignorant, states of mind that are inclined towards wisdom, and various other states of mind that reflect, like states of mind that are concentrated, states of mind that are awakened even. There's a whole range of states of mind. So how can we translate that back into how we do this practice? In essence, it's being aware of thoughts, mental phenomena, and also moods and states of mind. When we're talking about being mindful of anger, for example, it comes in that domain. Even though anger has a lot of somatic aspects to it, and anger can include a whole range, the whole of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, but it's very strongly related to that particular foundation. So at a very practical level, I would say it's working with painful thoughts or difficult thoughts, and also happy thoughts as well as emotions and moods. So what we do is we become aware of, so let's talk about thoughts, these trains of thoughts, the thinking patterns. When we become aware of a thinking pattern, we start to attend to it. When we can be aware of it and attend to it in a mindful way, in the Satipatthana Sutta, it talks about, there's a refrain that goes something like, I contemplate this phenomena, whether it be body or mind or Vedana or phenomena, internally, externally, and internally and externally. I contemplate the arising, the passing, and the arising and passing. I contemplate it just being there, knowing it fully, comprehending it fully, or knowing it is arising. And I also, this is the last line of the refrain, I contemplate it in a way where I'm putting aside desire and discontent for the world. In other words, backing off on craving, sensual craving, craving to be somebody, craving to not be somebody, and craving in general, which includes putting craving to not craving for like craving that arises as aversion, like craving to push away. So you're putting aside desire for something, craving for something that's pleasurable, as well as craving to push away which you're averse about. In other words, you're stepping off that wheel of samsara because you're not feeding into craving. So when we come to a very practical level, you might be having thoughts, mental phenomena arising. We can look at it in a way where if we can look at it in a way where we're not entangled in it, not caught up in it, not buying into it, and also not resisting it and censoring it, not judging it negatively or positively. Well, we could be discerning it as unhelpful or helpful. But what we're doing here is just stepping back and watching the show. You're just watching the passing of thoughts rather than getting caught up in them. And there's a lot of analogies that are used in therapy about this. Some of the analogies are like watching the carriages of a train pass by, and you don't try to stop the train, nor do you run along and jump onto the train. You just watch the carriages pass by. Or you're watching a parade pass by, and the parade has all these placards saying you're an idiot, you're a fool, whatever these thoughts are that you begin to identify with. You just let them pass by rather than jumping into the parade and taking up a placard. Another analogy is like being a doorman or a door person, at a hotel, where you open the door, you welcome the guests in, but you don't follow them up to their rooms. And when they leave the building, you open the door, you wish them a good day, but you don't follow them out into the taxis and the buses and all the rest of it. It's this being able to just see the impermanence of thoughts, being able to see that thoughts aren't necessarily facts to be believed, which is a sign of their unreliability. And being able to see that these thoughts are not direct readouts on reality. They're not, even though I say I'm an idiot, it's not necessarily true. It's not the reality of what I am. And the same goes with emotions. You can see emotions in different ways. One way we can see emotions is like waves that come, and we can surf really painful emotions. Sometimes we can, in other words, we're not dumped by these emotions, and we can just see the arising of the emotion and note it. We can feel it in our body, perhaps. Whatever way we see this emotion, we see it arising, we see it passing, rather than getting caught up and identifying with. Even our language talks about it like this: I'm an idiot, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm happy, I'm whatever. So it's being able to step back and watch these emotions come and go. And it's being able to see that there's moments, there's these, one thing leads on to another, leads on to another, leads on to another, leads on to another. When we're having like a hard day, it's really useful just to see the momentariness of it. Like there's one moment, lifting your foot and putting it down, and you might have an intention arise, then you might have something else arise. It's this moment-to-moment awareness, and that, we could call that mindfulness. That mindfulness starts to break through our identification with thoughts and emotions and states of mind as being who and what I am. We're able to see through that, the conceit I am. We begin to see, take out the mine, I and myself, the craving, the conceit, and the views. As there was a wonderful talk last night by a beautiful person over there. A beautiful continuum of streams of dependently arising processes interacting. Okay, I've probably talked enough. So look, I'll guide you into these two meditations. I might take on a heal approach for the joy one. No, maybe I won't. I'll do it in a way where I'll invite you to think of someone that brings joy to your heart, or just think of joy, or think of appreciation, and just someone that you feel perhaps appreciative of, or if you can find it in yourself. Children are really great like this. appreciative joy when we can see our kids come home with a new piece of art, even though it's really kind of messy. It's wonderful. You have a real sense of appreciation about that. Or you can just think of Lisa and Ali and Karen, or your friends here. Just some sort of appreciation. Feel that sign and then nourish it and let it fill you. Okay.